I met up with Emily Ball, who is CEO and founder at both Active Step Podiatry Clinic, and also what we really touched on was her work with her leading practice business. So, leading practice is all about helping other, mainly podiatry clinics, with their growth, mentorship, peer support, which is something which I really believe in. So, enjoy the podcast and let us know what you think. So, Emily, talk to me about what you see the state of the MSK in mainly the private healthcare sector at the moment.
I think what I'm seeing is just increasing demand, ever increasing demand, in fact. We're seeing a huge number of patients that are opting for private healthcare now rather than go onto waiting lists. I think certainly the public are becoming much more aware that private services are more accessible and that they can see somebody that's highly qualified and skilled, within 1 to 2 weeks rather than having to wait months. I think they're recognising that they can get much higher quality care than they can on the NHS, because practices are investing in state of the art kit. So we're definitely seeing an ever increasing trend, and that's only good for private healthcare.
Well, it is. I mean, having seen your practice, it's really impressive, very shiny and new. You've got some massive rooms here. And like, how do you see the growth of your business? And I'm talking about an active step here, but then also we're going to talk about the business where you're helping other podiatry clinics and other healthcare practices. But where do you see the potential of it going?
So historically, we used to just do general services, so chiropody, verrucas, ingrown toenails, that kind of thing. We were one of the early adopters for doing MSK in podiatry. So in the area, I think there was only one competitor when I started out. So it was quite a new thing for podiatrists to be doing at the time. This is about 10 years ago now. Now it's routinely done. Any progressive practice is doing MSK services in podiatry, but it's just going up a notch every few years. So about 8 years ago, I invested in a shockwave machine. I think I was one of the first podiatrists in the country to do that. Now I would say every progressive practice has one. So that's become commonplace within podiatry, as are lasers and things. So for me, the future is to keep up with that, ever increasing demand for higher level services. So we're currently investing in things like injection therapy, and ultrasound therapy. Sorry, not ultrasound therapy, ultrasound diagnostics.
Yeah.
So I think the trend at the moment in my industry is that people are constantly upskilling to meet the demands of the patients coming through.
Like you mentioned, progressive
Mm.
practice. Like, how would you categorize a progressive practice?
So I think most people's impression of podiatry is that single practitioner working out of a rented room or maybe doing home visits. That's the podiatrist of the past. What we've witnessed over the last 10 years again is practices building teams, leasing premises, buying buildings, and developing these much higher spec, high end practices. They are the progressive practices. They're the people that are recognizing that in order to stay at the forefront of modern medicine, they need to invest in their practices, stay up to date with upping their skills and learning new technologies, but also building their teams to also support the patient demand that's coming through.
And because yeah, that is what we're seeing when I'm out there, and it's exactly the sort of client group that is it. It's you want to
Mm.
help them in terms of the
Yes.
way that they're growing. And like, what do you think is restricting such practices, or what are the biggest barriers for those practices really growing, flourishing more?
That's a really great question. And this is what I see every day. Most of these people didn't go into building a business. They went into building a private practice because they were passionate about it and they loved doing the job, podiatry in this case. But the biggest limiting factor to them growing is knowledge of how to build a business, but also how to lead and develop people. So they are the biggest constraints that I'm seeing in private practice right now to people being able to grow and sustain a practice and a team.
And at what point did you realise that?
Through my own experience, actually. So when I started out, it was just me, same as most people. And I couldn't I couldn't manage the demand that I was getting for my services. So I knew I had to recruit in order to grow. And I made a lot of mistakes in the early years in my recruitment, not getting the right people or recruiting out of desperation. Um, but over time, you realise that you have to learn how to do it. So I invested in coaching, and I joined a coaching group, and I learned how to run a business. And within that, I learned how to grow and develop people and recruit people. So it's as simple as that. I think for most people that want to grow a team, you have to invest in yourself in order to learn the skills, and learn from the experience of the other people in your group as well. That's so powerful. Those peer groups are incredible because you're surrounded by other progressive practice owners who also have lived experience of the challenges that you're facing. So it's a powerful learning tool to learn from others that are maybe one or two steps ahead of you.
Yeah, well, I'll come back to something else, but like you set up leading practice
I
now,
did,
so
yeah.
you've created this group of a network of that peer group
Mm.
coaching and so on. Just give me a bit more introduction and background on that.
So I set up leading practice. It's been going nearly a couple of years now, and that was in response to my own experience of having to step away from my practice. So my daughter got sick, and I was no longer able to work in my practice. And that had a very negative impact on my team, and I saw my revenue decline. And what I realised was I'd created a lot of dependency on me as a leader. So I decided that I would invest in leadership development for my team, not just the senior people, but everyone in the team, so that we had a team that was leading themselves within their own function, but was also sort of working towards the values and the vision that I had created. And by doing that, we managed to grow the business in my absence. What I recognise is there are so many scenarios where practice owners have to either, step away from their practice, whether they're having a baby or they're caring for a loved one, or they simply want to take a sabbatical and take several months off. And that most people feel, a lot of fear around doing that because they're worried about their business declining, and things going wrong. So what I set out to do with Leading Practice was help develop leadership within practice owners, business resilience, but also help them with understanding their business metrics and growing their practice at the same time. So that's what we coach and mentor within the group. We teach people how to do all of those three things.
I think it's so important to take time out of your business. I
Mm.
joined a business group 2 years ago, and it's made such a difference for my confidence. I think also in terms of sometimes me, we're not the best person to do certain things in the business. I'm horrible at doing detail orientated things, whereas there's people in my business who are great at doing that. And having that coaching just allows you to take a step back and actually look at what do you want to do and then the structure. So how do you, like, in terms of that process within leading practice, like how much of that journey, because that's a real life one for me, how often do you see that sort of those sort of feelings when they come into the group?
So most people when they come to the group, that is the only opportunity they've had over 3 months to actually, like you say, take a step back, take a sort of bird's eye view of their business and start looking forward. Because when they're working in their business, they're in the weeds. They're focusing on the day to day. They're reacting to the issues that are thrown at them on a day to day basis. When they come to the group, they're able to start thinking about what are the opportunities, where are the areas for growth and development. So that's really powerful. Just having that time set aside to make that plan just makes it way more likely to actually happen.
Mm. Yeah, no, I think it is as well. And also, I think one of the things that we find when we're going into business is we're selling medical technologies to them. And they're one of the challenges that we see is that they wonder how they're going to sell it and then, more importantly, get their team upskilled. But what is your views on sales in healthcare? It's quite
Sure.
an interesting, hot topic,
Mm.
controversial topic at the moment.
So one of the common trends that I see is people offering bonus and incentives for selling certain treatments or delivering a certain amount of revenue. And the truth is that is very transactional. It's a very much what I call a carrot and stick approach. Have I got that right? Dangle the carrot, have a nibble, and then beat them with a stick if they don't meet their
Yes.
meet their targets, etc. What we find works much better, certainly from a coaching perspective, is really trying to understand your team's values and beliefs around what great treatment is. Because the truth is, your team genuinely want to help patients get the best outcomes, but they don't care about your numbers. That's not what drives them. That's not what brings them to work every day. So if you can really understand what they believe great patient care looks like, and most of the time, they believe that it is delivering gold standard treatment and evidence-based treatment and working to NICE guidelines and all of those things. And the truth is that actually using things like shockwave and laser therapies and delivering exercise rehab and certain therapies, those things are gold standard treatment. And when they can recognize that, everything changes, because they actually start treating patients in the best possible way, not because they've been told to. And that drives performance. So you need to understand your team, so know your team, then bring them together. We call that cohere the team. And then lead them. Lead them towards great performance and great patient care. And that's your job as a leader, is to help them see that, rather than be very transactional and give them targets to work to where they have to sell a certain number of treatments. It just doesn't work long term.
Yeah. What is the reaction when you go through that process? You just described it very eloquently in 2 minutes there, but like when you're going through it, what's their initial response?
It's powerful. I think nobody wants to see themselves as not being a great clinician. So things like metrics and KPIs can be really useful to actually exhibit behaviours. So for instance, if somebody isn't rebooking their patients, so say their rebook rate is 20%, that means that they're not treating 80% of their patients. And that means that 80% of their patients are unlikely to get the outcomes that they want. That's how I talk about rebook. Are you putting your patients onto treatment plans? It's not about the number, it's about whether you're getting people better. And I can guarantee you, if you're not rebooking patients, you're probably not getting them better. So when you tap into that belief around great patient care, rather than just, draw on the fact that they haven't hit their numbers, then that lands with them, because they recognise great patient care, and that's it, fundamentally.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. And when you get in the companies together, it's 11 that are in your group currently, isn't there? So how does that work? Because one of the things that we find is there's quite a big competitive element within the healthcare field. How open are people generally to share what their challenges are? I don't know if you go into numbers and things, but how open are people to sharing that?
This group are particularly very vulnerable with each other. They share their numbers openly. Some of them are fairly close in proximity, actually, but they don't see that as necessarily a threat, because they believe that there's enough demand, enough patients to go round. And quite often clinics have different cultures, they attract different types of patient groups and things, and they offer different services. So we don't see that in our group. We don't see them competing with each other. There's a huge amount of transparency and trust within the group. And that really helps, because they're willing to share their lived experience to help each other. But it's a giver's gain, they give and they get back.
I think it's really refreshing to hear that, because there's so much opportunity. We see it again day in, day out when we're out there, and the potential, we've only just scratched the surface within the private sector. And I really believe that if we're all trying to really push things on, improve things, help develop people, not just clinically, but help develop them as people within the business world, all of us are going to do really well in that. So we sell shockwave ultrasound, various different devices, and it's very competitive out there. But I really believe that we're all pushing in the right direction, whether you're a clinician, industry, clients even. We're all trying to do the same thing in terms of help deliver much better healthcare for everyone.
Absolutely. And we all know there's a huge recruitment challenge at the moment within the industry, healthcare generally. What I have found with our group is that they will support each other even in recruitment. So if somebody posts on social media, they will all engage with that post. They'll all share it to their own networks, knowing that they're going to get a huge amount of reach. I've even seen members share candidates that that weren't right for their own clinic, and say, look, I've interviewed this person. They were a good person, but they're just not the right fit for us. Would anybody like them to be referred to them? Now, you just don't get that in the normal world, do you? But when you're part of that trusted peer group community, that kind of stuff happens. And none of that group have had an issue with recruiting. They've all managed to recruit.
So, without wanting to do a leading question, that sounds like they know their identity and they've got conviction and confidence in what they're about.
Absolutely, it comes down to vision. So we work with them first and foremost with, do you have a clear and compelling and transparent vision? Because if you don't, then you're not going to attract people into that vision. So that's fundamental to any business, that you need to have a compelling vision statement. And people that apply to you need to be able to see where they fit within that. And if they can't, they're not going to apply.
So in terms of these structures of what you're doing here, again, I'm always thinking about reflecting on my company and so on. I love all these self-development talks, and I always like hearing you've always got a lot of great one-liners, which I like. And also read your book. Your book's great, so I'll put a link in for that as well at the end. But how have you formulated this process? I know you work with Paul on it as well, but what is your structure? How have you come up with what you do now?
Mostly from my own lived experience, really, of building a practice, but investing in coaching. Obviously, Paul, my business partner and partner in life.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. He comes from a leadership development background, and he brings that dimension. That was my area of weakness initially. As I said, I'd created my own leadership identity, but I hadn't really created leaders within my team, which meant that when I was absent, that was never going to be successful. So yeah, I mean, that's how I've done that. Everything that I've done, from recruitment through to developing a vision, through developing values, developing people, services, is mainly my lived experience, but by investing in myself with coaching and trying to plug the gaps where I've been weak. So yeah, that's the best advice I'd give anybody, is you have to invest in yourself. You are not going to be the master of everything. And guess what? Most of us who do healthcare aren't masters at business. That's a fact.
Yeah, I think also it just allows you, we were talking before off camera, it just allows you as the business owner to think, right, well, what is next?
Yeah.
How do you get out of being caught up 10 hours a day treating people, to give some creativity? Maybe you just don't want to do as much work anymore and you want to move on and do something else. So I think it just gives you those different options to say, I can do this. It gives you choice because you've got that structure. If you want to work 6 days a week, then you can do it. But otherwise, gives you options to look at different ventures.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have created time and freedom, and I think those two things are the most common desires of most practice owners. They want more time and they want freedom of choice about how much they work and when they work, etc. And thirdly, they want to earn well. They actually want to earn very well, but do less. Really common. I see too many people paying their team more than themselves, and they're the biggest contributor to their practice. They're basically funding their team, and they're in this trap where they can't step away because they're still the biggest biller in their practice. So what we do in Lead in Practice is help people develop the team so that they can do less and they can eventually step away and have that time and freedom that they want.
Yeah, we were talking about recruitment. You've got a background in recruitment as well.
I have, yes. I was string to my bow.
Well, no, it is really important, and it is a challenging thing, and it's likely. I had a chat with an economist on this podcast recently, and he was saying it's only going to get worse over the next 18 months and 2 years. So what are the key things that you would recommend to people when they're recruiting for any team members, but particularly healthcare practitioners?
First of all, your ad needs to stand out, and that starts with your vision statement. So that needs to be integrated into your job ad. As I said, people need to see themselves in the vision. So be really clear about what you do and what your vision is for the long-term future we're trying to create. We want someone to be part of this journey. We see this person being able to do X, Y, and Z. So really make sure that that is really clear and compelling. The second thing is recruitment is marketing. That's all it is. If you tell yourself there aren't enough candidates, then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because generally most people just stick an advert on their website. No one's going to see that unless it's got Google ads attached, and you're probably not going to do that. And if you've only got a couple of hundred followers on your personal Facebook page and your business page, guess what? Only 10% are going to see that. So you need to be spreading the net wide. You need to be posting in profession-specific forums. On if you've got professional branches, a network, within your profession, you need to be posting on those pages. You need to be contacting universities, anywhere where your candidate might be connected to. You need to be having your vacancies circulated to those groups as well. And here's the thing: social media. If people aren't engaging with your post, it will die within 24 hours. Fact. Okay, so you need to be consistently posting, because as I said, only 10% of your network are going to see any post at any one time. And you need to be getting engagement. So getting pods of people, whether that's a peer group or friends network or whatever it is, to comment and engage on your post and share with their communities is going to give you reach, and it's going to make sure that your post lives a lot longer than 24 hours. And remember, not everybody's looking at the time that you're posting, but they might be a month down the line. Okay. And we also need to recognize that about 60 to 70% of the workforce is disengaged. So they're not actively looking for a job, but if they saw the opportunity, it might make them think about leaving their job because they're disengaged. Okay. So we need to be reaching out to those people. So a really key strategy that most people don't adopt with recruitment is being proactive and do speculative inquiries. So you need to be looking at your Facebook and LinkedIn profiles and actively reaching out to people and asking if they know anybody that might be interested in a role with you. And if they don't, would they mind sharing with their friends network or with their colleagues or whatever. Now, the truth is you're actually asking if they're looking for a job, but you're doing it in a very diplomatic way. But you're going to get way more reach if you do that. And most people miss that trick. They don't reach out to people directly and ask, if they're interested. So a couple of top tips there.
Yeah, no, it's good advice. Good advice. And then just going back to leading practice in terms of recruiting people into that business for you,
Yeah.
how easy was it or challenging was it to get people to come and take time out of their day and actually commit to doing something like that?
It's not that easy. We're looking for the top 1% of people to join our group. 1%. Yeah, so it's extremely hard to find the right practices to join our group because we want progressive people. We want people that have the mindset of growth. We want people that are committed to taking action. And that is a big thing. We're not going to spoon feed them everything, and it's not going to happen without them taking action. So I've spoken at conferences. We've done free webinars. Obviously my book has been quite useful in attracting the right people towards the group. So I wouldn't say it's easy, but when we get people inquire about joining, they're generally the right people. They're people that are ready to take that step and start developing themselves, developing their team, and growing their business.
Yeah. And
1%.
1%. No, it is. It is. So, what would your advice be to someone else who's got a practice and they're unsure exactly what they want to do with it? What would your advice be for those people?
Definitely coaching. Whether that's with me or somebody else that's qualified to do it and experienced enough to do it. But you need to understand your business first and foremost. What are the numbers that underpin your vision? How will you know when you have succeeded? What is the definition of success? If you don't understand the numbers that drive your business, you will not know where to focus your energy. And that's critical, because we all know that if you focus on 20% that makes the biggest impact, you'll get 80% of the results. Okay, so you need to know what that 20% of things that you need to do is in order to create the biggest impact in your practice. And that starts with understanding your business and your numbers. business coaching.
Very good.
Number two.
Two.
A growing business needs people, and you cannot do this alone. So without people, you're never going to grow, and you're never going to be able to step back and create a saleable asset or retire or have time out, etc. So leadership development is absolutely critical if you're growing a high performing team. So leadership development is my number two.
So three?
No,
No,
I think those two
they're two very good ones.
Very critical, yeah.
And then in terms of like reflecting on yourself, like what would your advice be to yourself, younger self? You've come out, you've gone into recruitment.
Yes.
What would you say to yourself back then?
I would say I was very hard on myself in the early years, and I was trying to reach the pinnacle of success as early as possible. But actually, on reflection, I think learning through the mistakes and the, some of the failures through my life has made me much stronger and more resilient, and been very key lessons to the growth that I've experienced since then.
What would you say is that the biggest
Patience.
failure?
Oh, sorry. The biggest lesson was just be patient.
Right.
Biggest failure.
Or the most impactful, biggest sounds a bit negative.
I think getting it wrong in the early days in recruitment, definitely. Getting the wrong people into my business, because it set me back 6 months at a time. Every time I got the wrong person, it set me back another 6 months. So being patient, there's that word again, and focusing on getting the right people that fit the culture and the vision that I was trying to create, I think would have saved me potentially a good few years to where I am today.
I think, yeah, patience is such an important one. And I think the positive reflection that you said you didn't really do there, like on the surface, people will look at your business, my business, and be like, wow, she's got everything, it's nailed, she's doing well, she's da. Whereas the reality, and I get a number of messages about that, about what we're doing, and I'm like, that's great. But then in my head, I'm like reflecting on the challenge that you've got going on here, or we've got to do that there. So how do you reflect? What have you got any particular strategies to say, right, I'm going to look back at certain things to say, look how far you've come, or how do you do that?
Yeah, I live in the gain and not the gap. There's a great book called 10 Times is Better Than 2 Times by Dan Sullivan. And he talks about looking at how far you've come, like you just said, rather than thinking about how far you've got to go. And it's about accepting that life is a journey, and that your experiences have brought you to where you are today. So I practice gratitude a lot these days. I think about how grateful I am to have the things that I've got and not think about the things that I don't have. And I'm ever optimistic, maybe too optimistic sometimes. But I just accept that mistakes and setbacks are just part of the journey towards what we're trying to achieve.
I think it's a great message, and I genuinely think you're a massive, massive benefit to the industry. Every time I meet you, you're really positive, very articulate. I think what you're doing with leading practice is great, and the industry really needs it. I certainly will be referring people to speak to you because I think you just it's really good for the industry, and the potential of private MSK healthcare I think is massive. I don't think a lot of the market realise the real potential that they can do with what they're doing, and we need more people like you doing what you're doing. So well done with that, and
thank you
for sharing your experiences with me.
It's my pleasure.